Cybernation Uncensored.
To another episode of Forlorn Dopes. I hope so. My bandwidth seems to be a little low right now. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah, so I guess we can get started. Welcome to Tales from the Forlorn Dopes. I am your host, Cybersmily, with my co-host.
I am Wisdom. And I am so happy to be here on this ridiculously cold day. Greetings, programs.
Yes, it is cold. And it's very odd because a week ago it was like in the 80s for where I live. And then it went down to the 30s. And then it went back up to the 80s. And then it went back down to the 30s. And now it's just rainy and miserable.
Yeah, but climate change is a myth. Don't worry about it. It's all fake.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, so welcome everybody. Still trying to sort my whole brain out. So
we actually start because my screen on Cyberpunk or Cybernation Uncensored is still showing the countdown.
It is, which means there's a delay in my signal. Like I said, my bandwidth seems to be pretty darn low, and I don't know what I can do to squash it. I'm doing my best.
What started? So.
Yes, so we did start. We are live. Trust me. Again, I think there's just a big delay because my signal is just taking forever to get up there. But we talk. Worst case scenario is they get to see it on YouTube.
That's how it happens sometimes.
Yeah, and I think the other problem is my wife is also doing a online course of some sort or Zoom meeting of something. So
there you go.
She does, if you ever heard of a thing called NaNoWriMo, basically it's National Writers Association. Basically a bunch of people just try to pound out 50,000 words in a month for a book, novel, novelette, short story, whatever. So she hasn't done it in like 10 years. She used to do it quite every year. Just kind of gave up. But this year she decided to do it again. And they're having, various competitions and stuff. So.
That sounds pretty awesome, but at the same time, let's go ahead and throw her under the bus and blame her for it. We're just going to do that. Not seriously.
Yep. So, anyways, let's get into it. So, Cyberpunk news. Was there a recent DLC? There was a recent DLC with Elfline.
They dropped 1.61. Which means people can finally get the iconic knives from the vendors that they weren't able to get beforehand if they'd ever visited the vendors even once.
Yep.
So that's a plus. You still can't get the cleaver, which is bullshit. But especially since I had one and they took it out of my inventory instead of just giving it to me.
Yeah,
Uh,
and the other thing is they patched a exploit. So
I don't know why they care about it, to be honest. I don't know why they keep patching money exploits. It's not an online game.
very,
It's
very true.
it's really single player game. So why the fuck do they care? It doesn't make any sense to me. If there was an online component to it, sure, I could see that. Uh, but I would assume even if there was an online component, we'd all be. I don't know how that would work, to be honest, because all our characters are V, even though they're all personally customized. So just would everyone we talk to just say V, and we'd all raise our hands?
Well, are you Victor or are you Victoria? Right?
I mean, I'm neither. I'm Swift, but that's me.
Yeah. So yeah, so that dropped. I haven't really played into it, but I probably should try to finish off my last iteration, which is Street Kid Male, which was my last iteration of a character that I have yet to do with that game.
Are you male and female for each one?
Yes.
Okay, you're much more dedicated than I am.
Yeah, because supposedly, and again, I don't see it too much, but supposedly if you play, well, it's not necessarily female, but it's, I forget what the criteria is. If you have like a voice of a male or a voice of a female, the system runs differently, or there's different dialogue options, which I haven't really noticed. This latest,
I can see the romance options, but
yeah, but there was other. They said that there was other changes, and granted, I haven't really documented them all. But I try, just to see if there is any difference between the two. I have noticed different things happening. Like there was a kind of a dialogue between V and Johnny that happened outside of the church, the Voodoo Church. That also happened outside the motel. After Hananako's doll came in. So it was weird to see that dialogue in two different places. So there is definitely some differences between how you play. And granted, I would not as dedicated as some people are on showing those changes or even documenting those changes. So, is what it is. The other thing that happened in Cyberpunk news is Artausorian put out a DLC for Elfline the card game. I haven't checked that out because I'm not much of a Elf Online fan. Go figure.
I don't know what to think about Elflines. Like, it was a neat concept, but like they're really like going into it, and I mean, I just don't know that it's something I would ever use in my game.
Well, I mean, think about it. That Elfline was actually a April Fool's kind of prankish thing.
Yeah, and it's just kind of taken on a life of its own, which is cool. I mean, any content is content, so.
Yeah,
it's like they could have. I don't know. It's just kind of different.
it is. The other big news with Artausorian, and kind of like, I don't know. I wish Jay Gray gave some spoilers out 2 days ahead of time, but
2 days before the end of this shit. You can hear him giggling in the background when we ask him almost specifically about it.
Yes. Specific, yeah. So apparently they're doing a supplement for edgerunners, and that's going to be coming out probably next year. Don't expect it anytime soon. I have a feeling that Black Chrome is going to come out beforehand, because it sounds like they're just putting the polish on that.
Yeah, like they just announced a DLC for like a 2077 conversion, and then I guess they're still putting out the book. But yeah, we asked him specifically about this stuff, and he just kind of was up in the air about it. But I knew he was hiding something. But I just knew it. Jay, yeah, I'm on to you, buddy.
Yeah, I think we need to start bribing a little better. Or putting more points into our social skill.
Bags of dice. We'll mail them bags of dice. Like, hey, you know.
Is that what he's into? Dice for games?
I don't know. I remember he got excited about the Cyberpunk dice, but I don't guess. I just figure he's a gamer. All gamers love dice.
True, but he's also a father, so I think there's probably something that we could give him that would excite his child, and that would go a long ways as well.
Dice, they're shiny and look like candy. And
yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of it for Altar Saurian. Again, we kind of, on our last episode, we got a little bit of a lowdown of what's going on. There was 2 other supplements that were supposed to come out this year from Altar Saurian besides Black Chrome. One was the Danger Gals dossier, which, as far as I understand, they're still putting a little bit of a polish on that, and said it might be coming out this year. And Black Chrome coming out next year, Q1. And then there was the Rogue Weaponry. What was it called? Shoot. My brain has gone completely to mush.
Yeah, my brain's there too.
But basically, it was cards for all the weapons, and that they are, again, probably going to put out in the first quarter. And like he said, that there's been just a crazy thing on production and publishing and all that because of COVID and also Megacorps stealing the paper shortage.
Yeah, I had never thought of that until he mentioned it. But yeah, Amazon taking all the paper to make boxes and shit like that. That's an insane, evil dick mega corporate move for sure.
Yes, that's the life we're living in. You know, I mean, if you think about the corporations today, it's totally Cyberpunk 2020. Because what is it, like food brands? There's only like 2 or 3 companies that own all food.
Yeah, pretty much
production.
all food production is. It's a mess, dude. Yeah. And we have just made it easier and easier for them to rake in record profits whilst the wages remain stagnant and housing prices we are living in a dystopia.
But who'd have thought that there wouldn't be any Chrome or booster gangs or AVs involved with the reality we live in?
There's enough violent gangs that I don't guess they really need cybernetics. But yeah, AVs would have been nice. Yeah. Personal cybernetics, that'd be pretty cool. But at this point, we just screw all that up too.
Yeah. So that's about it from Altor Saurian when it comes to Cyberpunk. The other thing is from Cyberpunk Media. I I've been looking into figuring out what's coming out or what's on the horizon from a television movie kind of source. I didn't see too many things that are upcoming, but what we're currently in is the series called The Peripheral, which is based upon William Gibson's novels, which is on
we've been
Amazon.
this one for a while, and it's living up to the hype. It's ridiculously cyberpunk. There's a little bit of time travel, which I'm not a fan of, just in general. But the visuals on the show are fantastic. The story has got me engrossed in what's going on. I love all the characters. There's so much treachery going on, and you just can't really trust anybody at anything.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing with Peripheral, and the way that my wife has already read the novel, she was kind of describing it as similar to what's being shown in the series. However, when you look back at like Westworld, and again, I don't know how far you got into Westworld if you're on season 4
I
yet.
finally talk about that in a minute.
Okay, so the whole concept of AI computing process to kind of predict human behavior and the future, right? She's going into a virtual reality that's, according to all of it, is in the future. But is it a computer AI model of what the future is going to happen because the AI is that smart, right? To be able to predict exactly how things are going to go, how things are, what decisions people are going to make, and the path of the world and history, and that this is going to happen because the computing process of an AI is able to figure out exactly how everyone's going to react and predict that into a future that is, what was it, 40 years in the future, I think, for The Peripheral. Sorry,
Something like that.
spoilers, everybody.
Yeah, I didn't pay enough attention to the actual dates, just enough to know that this is in the future. Both timelines are in the future, so it stays consistently cyberpunk regardless of which timeline is going on. So that's really all I care about. Usually in those shows, like, you'll see the future, and the future will be cyberpunk, and then they'll come back to like present day where they can save some money. But they're not going for that. It's quite a pleasant change.
The best cybernetic is the squad connection.
The haptic connection.
Yeah,
shit is badass.
I'm really digging that, and like trying to come up with how that would play in the game.
There's something like that in Cyberpunk, or in Cyberpunk 2020, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, or even which book it comes out of. But it allows squad members of like a 3-man team. It's pretty limited in that scope, but to basically use feed off each other to triangulate enemy positions, get feedback, like limited. I guess you could kind of see through each other's eyes a little bit. I don't know. It's been a while since I read it. So long that I don't remember which book it came out of. But I imagine it's probably one of the Chromebooks, one of the more overlooked entries.
Yeah.
Hell, I be misremembering everything completely, but yeah, it's I would very much like to see something like that. And if I can't find anything, I may have to add it myself into Data Fortress at some point. But without giving out any spoilers, how this works is if you join the military, like they hook you up with the rest of your squad, so everybody's feeling the same thing. Like can cue into each other's visuals, auditory. Has a constant like readout, I guess. I don't know. I'm using the wrong term, but you're constantly updated on like everybody else's vital statistics and whatnot, and yeah, you just use it to coordinate tactics and response. And it's really, really cool and a really groovy concept. At one point, without giving any spoilers away, there's one of the guys with this implanted in him gets threatened, and he replies by saying, "You may." I'm paraphrasing. I'm not quoting. You can take me out, but understand. I'm connected to every single person in my squad. So if you take me out, you still have to deal with like everybody else in the platoon.
Yeah.
Who are all to know who you are and what you've done. So that's my statement.
And he also emphasized that whatever emotions I'm feeling towards you, all of my squad feels the same emotions towards you. Yeah, that was
which plays
scene.
out well. Cause at first, you wonder like, why are all these dudes like so loyal to these people? But it's because this one guy is just super loyal, and so everybody else is super loyal, and it works out really well. I really like that aspect of the show.
Yeah, there's a game mechanic in the BattleTech game, which precedes all of this. Basically, it was called the 3C computer, in which you could tie in all members of a unit of a lance, right, and they would be able to get the benefits of like various ranges, right. So if a mech was so close, everyone in the squad was that close because of the computer just regurgitating, hey, this is where he is and this is where you guys are, and you triangulate it, and guess what? You don't have any range modifiers anymore. That's what it kind of reminds me of. Is some type of modifier that whoever's in the best position provides those benefits to the rest of the squad.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm going to try to watch or rent. Was it called Expired? There was another Cyberpunk with the guy from True Blood and Mr. Agent Smith.
Oh, yeah, I like him.
It came out this year.
And said his.
But it was kind of like a quick blurb of him. Oh, the actor is Ryan Quanten.
Agent actor. What the hell's his name?
Quanten is he was in True Blood. He was hilarious in True Blood because he played this stupid, well, not stupid, but kind of Hugo. So
I never watched True Blood, so I can't really comment on that.
Oh, you should go watch it. It's actually a good series. Granted, it's not really cyberpunk, but If you were into Vampire the Masquerade.
I wasn't.
Okay, so never mind.
Yeah, it's one of those things where the fans kind of turned me off of it. I like Star Trek in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah, again, the only other thing within media is supposedly we might be getting another season of Edgerunners, but it's probably not going to be around David. It might be around something else.
I mean, it would have to be around like just it's Night City. There's countless stories to tell. I don't really care about David anymore. That story's been told. It was a good story. I enjoyed it. I'd honestly like to see a different animation team take it on. One that wasn't so over the top when it came to action or turning technology into just absolute fantasy.
I actually liked Studio Trigger because I was reflecting on the season, and to me, they told an amazing story.
They told a really good story. I enjoyed Edgerunners. I just I'm not a fan of the way they do action, to be honest, and I definitely wasn't a fan of them turning Sandevistan into super speed flash powers.
Yes,
or the
because,
weird
because there's still physics.
Yeah, there's still physics. The weird magnet thing that the exoskeleton thing used, where just ignores physics completely.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, to me, the appeal of Cyberpunk is sure some of the tech is fantastical, but it should always be believable.
Right.
And Edgerunners, towards the end, stopped having a believable tech level. It became this weird. They watch too many Fast and the Furious movies. Damn it, that's my bitch. Like, yeah, they're in a car chase, and cars are just like flying up in the air, and
but sometimes that's what makes a great cyberpunk movie. You know.
I mean, granted, the cars flying up in the air actually did kind of like resemble the anime, because every time you hit a bump, you take off. But
I mean, think of Nemesis, right? Shooting through a floor and just crashing through floor by floor as he's machine gunning the floor beneath him. Come on.
I mean,
that's not realistic either, but it's fucking awesome as a cyberpunk movie.
It was really awesome, but it wasn't like stupid.
Yeah.
And they were the first ones to do that. Like, later that scene got ripped off by like dozens of movies. But they were the first. Albert Pune was the first director to throw that into something. And it seemed believable at the time. I mean, you shoot something enough and put enough holes in something, you weaken it structurally.
Yeah, but you have to jump up and down on top of it a few times before it would crash through.
Sure. I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. Also, keep in mind that, everybody in Nemesis was a full Borg cyborg, basically. A full Borg conversion. So they wait a little bit more. I don't know. I'm just nitpicking at this point. But yeah, no, I enjoyed Edgerunners. I loved the story. I loved the characters. I wish it'd just been more grounded. That's that's the hill I'm going to die on.
Yeah.
I'd like to see some different animation studios with their take on Cyberpunk. The studio behind Cowboy Bebop, I think they do just phenomenal. Or Studio IG, or Madhouse even. Just I'd like to see some different takes. And I knew when they announced it was Studio Trigger that it was going to be some stuff like that. And to be honest, Edgerunners is definitely Studio Trigger's most subdued anime. They're kind of known for being over the top. So,
Yep.
yeah, no, we got a great show out of it, and I enjoy it.
Yeah.
I would have chosen some different things, but to be honest, I've said this many times, back in the 90s when I was first getting into the game, I dreamed of, what would a cyberpunk anime look like, because there's so many anime references in the books already. And finally, 30 years later, we got it, and it's fucking cool.
Very true.
And it brings people into the genre and into the game itself. So kudos to that.
Right. Yep.
Also, the most faithful adaptation as far as like the world I've ever seen in my life of anything.
Very true. Yeah, so when I was trying to do a lookup of Alter Saurian's DLC, apparently, was it one of my Bing? So Bing brought up like various products, because that's what search engines turned into, is just products when you're doing a search, not like back in the old days when you actually could find some of our old school fan sites. But anyways, someone is asking for $100 for the original Cyber Generation. And just a word of warning, kids. If you guys like going out and you want to get the original stuff, fine. You're probably going to pay quite a bit. But keep in mind that Alter Saurian is still producing hard copies of various stuff. And if you can't find it on Alter Saurian, there's a good chance you can find it on DriveThruRPG. Whether it's a PDF or on a print on demand. So if
I was going to say most of the stuff on DriveThru is also print on demand. So.
Yeah. So if you're seeing some of these prices, do not, and a fair warning, do not run out and buy. Holy cow! I'm sorry.
What's that?
So I just scrolled to the right, and Alter Saurian Games Cyberpunk Red, right? The core Red book is going for $228 on eBay.
On eBay? Is it signed?
I don't know. I had to open it up and take a look at it.
Like it's still in print.
I know.
eBay is so freaking weird, and it's funny because before 2013 or before 2077 was announced, all these books were dirt cheap. I was picking up extra copies of the core rules for like $10 a piece, and then 2077 got announced, and suddenly all these books are going for like $200 a piece, and a piece of your soul.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
and there's certain books you definitely aren't going to get, right? It's like, like Near Orbit. Good chance it's never going to get reprinted. And some of the Atlas stuff and the...
What's funny is most of the Atlas stuff is still dirt cheap, because I guess they don't realize that it's actually Cyberpunk 2020.
True. But yeah, there is, if you're looking for originals, yes, there are some that you definitely cannot get. Incomplete 2013 box set. Why would I get an incomplete version of the box set for $150?
Because the box is $150.
Exactly. And it says incomplete, and all it shows is the box. So that means you might be buying the box for $150.
What shape is the box?
Pretty ratty. I mean, it's
eBay, man. It's
Oh,
It used to be.
sorry. Here we go. Condition used. Missing the main rule book, but the rest is present as well as no splits. Some rubbing. I'll ship. The main rule book. Well, there's 3 main rule books in it. Do you mean all 3? Do you mean 1? So, in other words, are you just shipping the box?
There's the main rules. There's Friday Night Firefight, which is the combat rules, and then there's Night City. Plus, if I recall, there's like the scream sheets and character sheets.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I don't think the 2013 box had dice in it. I know mine didn't, but I got my copies.
I don't think
used.
so either. First edition 2013 for $350. Used.
Well, yeah, because there's no such thing as a non-used copy.
Contents, welcome to Night City, views from the edge. It says it's all complete, in very good condition.
Does it have dice?
I
don't
know. I don't think it ever did. I'm pretty
I
sure
know the
Cyberpunk
2020 box set supposedly came with dice, but none of my copies did.
There's a 2020 box set?
Oh yeah, it's fucking cool too.
God damn it.
You didn't know that?
No, not really.
Yeah, I mean, it really was just a box with the 2020 cover on it. And then inside it was just the main book and some character sheets and scream sheets and.
Anyways, listen,
I'm not
kids.
really sure why it was a box set, to be honest.
Anyways, my point is, kids out there looking for vintage shit. If you're a real hardcore collector, okay, fine. Maybe you want an original copy, or I know with the corporate books and the Chrome books, they kind of consolidated them into one book. You might want to have the individual books. Fine if you want to go for that, but there be wary of some of this stuff because
if you really got a disposable income and some money burning a hole in your pocket, sure, go ahead. But if money matters to you at all, just get a PDF.
Yeah.
Or print on demand. Or go to Artal Sorian's website. Most of the shit is available there. Definitely shop around. Don't plop down $350 for something that's just not worth the money unless you're an absolute completist.
So, speaking of old books, let's talk about Rockerboy.
Well, okay. I was gonna say I finally finished Westworld, but yeah, we can just jump straight into it. There's really nothing to say about the 4th season.
Yeah, the 4th season was a little disappointing.
I should have just stopped at the end of the 3rd season.
Yeah, 3rd season was good. The first half of 4th season was good, and then it just got into it. And all right, I'll settle my piece. Right, so all of a sudden they got very surprised of like, there's not going to be a 5th season. They canceled it. I'm like,
where the fuck would a 5th season possibly go?
I know. On the 4th season at the end, it's like, oh, she's restarting it again. God knows how many times she restarted it.
I mean,
spoilers, by the way, everyone. If you haven't watched Westworld, it is a good series. Don't get me wrong, it's a must-watch if you're a Cyberpunk fan.
Yeah, just then you can be as absolute baffled as I am by people's reactions that they canceled it and we're not getting a 5th season. Like, all the questions were answered.
Yep.
Everything's done. I'm not sure where you're gonna go. At that, a 5th season would just be making shit up at that point. But yeah, I just had to share that I finally finished it. It was fourth season was a slog. It's not that it's bad. It's just that it wraps everything up. Third season was my favorite season by far. It was ridiculously cyberpunk.
Exactly.
Not so much Westworld, but it was cyberpunk. But yeah, we can jump right into Rockerboy.
All right. So, Rockerboy has Colin Fisk as a writer, Will Moss, Scott Ruggles, Dave Ackerman, Glenn Wildermuth, Sam Shirley, and of course, Maxim Mike himself.
Let's take just a minute to appreciate this super badass cover. This is a 2013 book, and I mean, this guy is channeling Billy Idol to the max. I don't know what's going on with this crazy guitar keyboard thing, but I know it's awesome. I really love this cover. It might in fact be my favorite cover of the 2013 series, tied there with Near Orbit's cover, I should say. And since I believe they were both done by Doug Anderson, so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, for me, this cover definitely screams cyberpunk, right? Or the punk.
I mean, it's got the cyber. The dude's got a guitar hooked into his head with like
tons of wires.
I'm not sure what you would possibly need that many straps for, but judging by the number of buttons on this keyboard, maybe it isn't. Maybe it is necessary.
Yeah, but
I dig his fangs too. His vampire.
But again, he's a rocker, so he's a bit of a showman. So I highly doubt he needs 6 interface plugs hooked into his guitar to play this crazy ass instrument with crap load of various buttons on it.
I don't know, but I want to see. I want to read about this guy's story. I want to know who the hell this guy is supposed to be. He seems much more interesting to me than Johnny Silverhand, at least as far as a musician goes. This dude is badass.
Well, he could be one of the various rockers that are mentioned throughout the book, like Blood and Ice.
Sure. We'll just assign him something as we move through the book. Like we're just going to say that's the cover guy, exactly. And then expect everyone else to follow through with that, to just accept, because that's who we are.
So again, this was a supplement for 2013, and could easily fit in your 2020 campaign as needed. And yeah, let's start getting into it. So you have a table of contents, and the other thing is, similar to Solo of Fortune, it took that magazine vibe and kind of introduced various articles to kind of get you into the world and atmosphere of cyberpunk at that time, and kind of presented it that way. And I wish Artelsarian kept that going with the other supplements that they put in. Granted, I don't know what other supplements they could have done similar to this. I'm thinking of like the medical journal and for a medtech, which we never got for a supplement.
I will always lament that there was never a techie and medtechie supplement. It really seems to be a disservice to them that they're the only class that never got that.
Yeah, and they could have
got representation.
They could have done this with a netrunner, with like similar to how PC World or Wired or the other various tech magazines that are out there. So there's definitely a bunch of ways in which they can introduce to other roles and use them to contribute to this.
Yep.
So
I said that, but the truth is corporates really never got the representation they deserved either. There were the court books, but those were really just about individual corporations as opposed to the role itself.
yeah, and if they introduced like, hey, as a corporate with Arasaka, and you have a resource of this, you should have got, you should be able to call upon this resource or this resource, right? You could have called in like if you were a corp for Arasaka or Militech, you could have called in a strike team with a DC of, or a diff of 20 plus, right? Into a situation, or you could bring in this amount of equipment. That would have been nice to have in the core books. But again, I think,
or you need access to some new research and development project, or anything like that. I mean, there was so many things that they could have done with the corporate as in like fleshing out what the role actually is. It's always been a little bit of a disappointment. Those 3 roles just never got the love they deserved.
but I think with each supplement specific for the roles, it evolved over time. Like Wildside really was a later splat book for a role. Same with Live and Direct, in which, and again, we already we already discussed Live and Direct, and I think Rockerboy is a much better supplement compared to Live and Direct, even though it has similar.
100%.
It has similar characteristics in that it presents a lot of in-game stories and a lot of in-game fluff, but I think Rockerboy kind of presented it in a much different way, similar to the Solo of Fortune, in that it was just, yes, there is fluff, but it's a article about it, not like Live and Direct, which was kind of a source book way of doing it. I don't know. It's hard to describe exactly what I mean with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, Live and Direct is really more about the media in general, as opposed to like how to play the role. There's a little bit of it, but it doesn't really go into the detail for how to, like, the different types of, I don't know. Rockerboy is just more useful. It's good that both medias and rockers got represented, but I think the Rockerboy Sourcebook is a little bit easier to utilize in your game.
Yeah. So let's get into it. Again, similar to the whole magazine format, you would, especially in the 90s, late 80s, you would have letters from the fan in which the editor responds to them. There's, again, some pretty funny ones that go on here. And just the dialogue that you can interpret from that, which, again, gives you a little bit of the genre. Also, the whole layout of this particular magazine, you will find ads, just like fluff ads of various things. So in the letter section, you find a ad for Johnny Silverhand's new album.
Cool Metal Fire.
Yeah.
And it's a neat illustration too. I dig the illustrations in this book. It's just a hand holding a guitar coming up out of the smoke, but it's cool.
Yeah, it is.
And the whole letter just gives you a look into the thought processes of the world itself. Really, it's just a little bit of fluff.
Yep.
Spice things up.
And then again, the magazine, like magazines back in the day, would also give like quick news blurbs, which this, of course, does. And this is where you first encounter how this particular, and there is definitely some of it in Solo of Fortune, in which the art took photographs and
Yeah.
integrated them with the supplement, which I think this is one of the few game systems that actually did this type of artwork.
I mean, on one hand,
Pardon me.
photographs are easier than art, I think, in a lot of ways. So it saved them a little bit of money. It kind of makes it more relatable. Like, that's a real person right there. They're in costume. It looks cool. I want to jump back to the letters really quick.
Sure.
Just real fast. This dude mentions a drug called Widow's Breath, and that's a cool sounding name for a drug. I would have liked to have seen more about that. Apparently he tried to overdose and went blind. But Widow's Breath that's a cool sounding drug.
It sounds like something from the 2077 with Inhaler.
Yeah, it does. It definitely does. Or yeah.
Here, take a hit of this. What is it called? Widow's Breath. Okay.
I mean, that's definitely like a street drug type of, yeah.
Yeah, so they get into little short bits of news, little bits and articles around various band members, etc. One was like, was it Knife Edge?
Yeah.
He gets arrested, and just like little cool little things you want to read up about. And the other thing that we're going to get into is a lot of the articles in this particular supplement talk about Carrie, Johnny. So some of this was definitely pulled from into 2077, and I know a few of the YouTubers really reference this when they're talking about the lore around Johnny and Carrie. I know Mad Queen almost like verbatims took from this book, explaining the lore.
Like, she had no insight, but that's neither here nor there. Most of the YouTube lore guys, they were just quoting verbatim out of the books, which, I mean, I guess that's one way to do it.
Yep. So the first full-length article is an interview with Carrie Eurodyne, in which he talks about his days with Samurai, Johnny, and getting into his solo career, which, by 2013, Samurai has already been broken up for a few years by then. And he talks about the various band members. So if you played 2077, you know about not only Carrie, but Nancy, Denny, and the other band members of Samurai. So it's definitely a great read.
They got the basis for the personalities of the different band members. In particular, Carrie and his ridiculously low self-esteem.
Denny being like a really, I'm gonna kick your fucking ass.
Yeah.
You piss me off too much.
Nancy being, very pragmatic. Yeah, that all comes from this book, basically.
So it's definitely well worth read if you're looking into lore, not only of Cyberpunk itself, but also 2077, and getting that whole background of the mission when it comes to Carrie and Nancy, and getting the band back together.
I like that they flesh out that Carrie and Johnny got together due to their experiences in the Second South American conflict. Like, I thought that was a nice touch.
It is. Yeah, and again, this supplement really showed how Cyberpunk really was more progressive than a lot of games at the time, even for the generation that we were living in.
Yeah.
So the next article is in the listening room, in which basically it's a interview between Rockerboy magazine and T.C. McBride.
Of a band called Manjaro.
Yes.
Some kind of neo-funk thing that, sounds pretty awesome to me.
So it's a quick interview with one page. Again, fun read. And then, of course, I guess it would be a controversial article, but basically it's Hitler was a rocker boy. And then this... go ahead.
This article, to me, fleshes out, more importantly than anything else, what exactly the rocker boy is. Everybody comes to it thinking that a rocker boy has to be a musician, but no, a rocker boy is anybody who can sway the masses, be it a politician, a religious leader, even like military leaders, if they're charismatic enough. Like, anybody who can sway the masses and get people to, follow them along. That's what a rocker boy is.
Yeah, and it's also presented in an article fashion, right? Which I kind of like. And in this article, throughout the article, it talks about the various ages and who a rocker boy would have been during those ages, whether it was Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and various other people. But, once you get into the 90s, of course, that's when the years or the reality split off, and they started getting into really the person who really truly epitomized rocker boy and how it evolved into the cyberpunk world. The other thing I like about this article was there's also a split between the article, in which it was kind of a split of the in-game world giving an article, and then the out of game world giving kind of also a description on what a rocker boy is and what it means.
Yeah, it's half fluff and half this is how to apply it to your game, which, I mean, that's the way I like it done. Hello? Hello?
Sorry, I had to step away. Two of my cats were getting into it and needed to deal with
Oh,
something.
okay. Sorry about that. I thought it was me. I was like checking my phone. Am I disconnected? What's going on?
No,
sorry about that.
Apologize.
Yeah, no, I very much like when they split it up like this, so you can get a taste of what it's of the flavor behind it, and then how to apply it to your game. It works for me. I think more source books could benefit from this type of thing. Sometimes they mix the two together, and it always feels a little disjointed to me.
Yeah. It is a great article because not only, and again, they talk about the various people and idols throughout history and why those people were considered rockers. And basically, the whole concept is a rocker is somebody who tries to influence people to be or has some type of message that kind of makes people go out and do things. And I guess this day and age, you don't see it as much as you did like in the 80s, 70s, 90s, maybe even the early 2000s. Especially when it comes to like musical acts, right? I mean,
You don't see it from musical acts, but
Yeah.
you definitely see it from politicians and.
yeah, I was about to say there's the T guy, good old Donnie.
He
He is a rocker boy.
Rock boy. Fuck that dude.
Love him or
But
hate
yeah.
him, he's definitely a rocker.
He is a cult of personality that people just blindly adhere to and follow, ignoring any and all. Well, yeah, we'll go on to something.
So, and again, at the end of this article, there's a sidebar on kind of some concepts of what a rocker boy is. Whether it's a street poet, performance artist, social leader, activist, or politician. And also, I've seen various other discussions on whether it's Reddit or Discord or some other things on what a rocker boy can be. One concept that I kind of was like, huh, yeah, that's kind of a rocker boy is like, wrestlers, right? And that whole cult of personality when you get into like sports and athletes who kind of portray themselves and kind of market themselves into kind of this weird cult leader.
I mean, it really, like wrestling, professional wrestlers, like there's athleticism involved, but it's all a show, and they definitely whip the crowd into a frenzy and have giant like followings and I think rocker boy is probably a pretty apt description of a professional wrestler. Like that makes sense to me. You're right.
Yeah, so Doc Gazunks. Yeah, there is definitely a fuzzy line between media and rocker. Boy, this supplement actually gets into that, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. But just to answer your question real quick before we start getting into that specific article where it talks about it, is in this magazine, in the supplement. Go ahead.
Basically, the difference between a rocker boy and a media is a rocker boy is there to influence. They are there to put forth their agenda and get as many people to follow that agenda as possible. Whereas a media, they're there to inform. That's why their special ability is called credibility. Like,
Yep.
They are there to tell the truth, or at least what they believe to be the truth in some cases. That's the main difference. They both have followings. They're both, up on one stage or another, up on a platform. But yeah, that's the difference. One is there to influence. One is there to inform.
Well, the article that I'm referring to in this supplement, they classify it as a rocker boy is emotion, whereas the media is the mind. So the rocker boy is all about emotion, struggle, just going from your heart versus the media is the person who sits back and thinks about it and tries to. And granted, in this day and age, media is corresponding to the news, which it's very fuzzy in this day and age to kind of show that concept. But back in the day when this supplement was created and news was very more objective before Reagan came along and basically said news organizations doesn't necessarily have to prove that it is a fact. They can report whatever they want. That kind of turned the whole news organization and media into this the state that it is in now, which isn't
definitely
always about fact. It's more about opinion.
The modern journalist, there is a lot more bleed over where you have lots of journalists, lots of so-called journalists believing that they are in fact rocker boys, and in fact, at this point they are. They're not journalists. They are rocker boys. Where you have a journalist, especially like opinion journalists. Yeah, those aren't journalists at all. Those are just rocker boys who happen to be on a news show. Or a show calling itself a news.
Yeah, and it's not just, don't, you might be really thinking of more of the right news outlet, but there's definitely a lot of the left as well who are very rocker boyish in giving their opinion as well.
I didn't name any names or any organizations. So
to me, it seems like when I think about like that whole cult of personality, I often think more about the news organizations on the right more than I think about the left. But there are some people on the left who are also very cultish in a way.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm gonna go nonpartisan on this, I'm gonna say, on one side you've got Tucker Carlson. On the other side, you've got somebody like Bill Maher.
Yeah.
Neither of them are journalists. They're just rocker boys masquerading, basically.
Yeah. Whereas to me, media is more Reuters or Associated Press, who just give you the facts. That's all they do. They don't give any like spin on the facts or any type of leaning.
They don't tell you what to think. They just give you the facts.
Here's what happened. Here's who did it. Here's what you should do. So, the next article is On the Street with Maz Despair, in which an interview goes with a satirist, a political satirist, Maz Despair. This is actually an interesting interview.
Got the name.
Again, and it's only 2 pages. It's a pretty quick read. Again, it's very progressive of Altar Sorian and the gaming system, in which it talks about, LGBTQ. I'm sorry, I don't know all the letters of that word. I should learn them all. But basically, it gets into a situation in which the interviewee talks about how she was really influenced by a comedian who was about gay rights, who was assassinated along with the Speaker of the House during the Gang of Four. Again, there's a play throughout this whole book about the Gang of Four and how suppressed media and news outlets were. But again,
I mean, you're right. This definitely is another sign of how progressive they were and how ahead of the times. I mean, this was what, 89? Was that when this was put out?
Yep.
That any kind of gay representation in anything less than a satirical, it was either insulting like villainizing or played for laughs. That was really the only kind of gay representation that you had back then. And for this to just play it straight, that especially in as niche a crowd as role playing games were back then, and Cyberpunk was niche on top of niche because really it was all just D&D. It was very, very forward thinking. Kudos to R. Talsorian. They put in a lot of representation in a lot of their books, and I don't think they get enough appreciation for it.
Yep.
As well as, the whole Gang of Four thing and just how fucked up that whole situation was.
Right. And I think this kind of like gave some background into what that Gang of Four was. Because again, you had a blurb within the basic book. And this just added on to that background that you could kind of read into and develop as a referee into your own campaign of how serious some of this background was.
They made reference to the problems with the Gang of Four and the collapse throughout a bunch of the books, but you really don't ever find out what that actually was entailed until Home of the Brave.
Yep.
But keep in mind that, again, this was 89, so this book came out, and the whole Gang of Four concept came out just after the Iran-Contra scandal and finding out that, the CIA and the FBI had been like smuggling drugs out of Southeast Asia, and the FBI was smuggling drugs into the poor communities. So like it really plays on that whole, our government's been betraying us for a while and it's just now coming out.
Yeah. Yeah. So
and there weren't a lot of brave enough to like come out and criticize the government like that, even as mildly as R. Talsorian was doing. And I say mild just in the sense that they're talking about future events, not direct open criticism or anything.
Yeah, and I think that's why R. Talsorian took that very punk aspect. Is we're gonna nail in all these various social political issues, and we're gonna actually put them into our game of the hard reality of some things, and I definitely see it from various talks I've seen throughout various social medias over the decades. And the concept of games is, I want to escape. I don't want the harsh reality. And I think that's why Cyberpunk was always kind of a very niche game, is because it did introduce those hardships. And introduce those crazy real-world situations that people are trying to escape from.
I mean, the heart of punk is distrust of authority. And the heart of Cyberpunk is just that taken to the next degree. And it's going to reflect, even if it's happening in the future, it's like any good near-future fiction, it's going to reflect what the trends of the current times. And this is one of those situations where, regardless of all the warnings that science fiction gave us, this same problem just keeps getting worse and worse as those in power continue to grab more power.
Right. I'm just going to give you a little bit of warning there, Wisdom, but we're on page 22 of this book. There's 82 pages, so we got 60 pages to go through, and we got 45 minutes that we need to burn through. So I know our first half hour was all about Cyberpunk and the universe, but I think we need to...
I will rein it in.
Yeah. So hopefully we can ram
I mean,
it in. I think there's enough content in here that's it's pretty good, and we can kind of fluff over it. So the next section is the sound of today, which basically boils down into what instruments are being used for the world in general. And it's interesting that it doesn't really get into computers and how computers kind of really just became a musical instrument, or even the turntables, right? Because this was
yeah,
before
or
rap really took off.
keyboards, or any of that. I mean, this was the late '80s. By then, new wave had pretty much taken over everything, and keyboards were everywhere. But it really just, I mean, they talk about keyboards, but they don't talk about the mass synthesizer effects and all that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And this is the first section you actually get some gear in the supplements, and it gives you about dozen or so pieces of musical instruments that you can buy, from drums, guitars, midis. Yeah, midis. That was a big thing back then. Microphones, and various other things that you could buy as a rocker to set yourself up. But it basically goes into several paragraphs about guitars, several paragraphs about drums and what they mean in the 2020 world, and keyboards. And then it kind of gives a very short accessory thing, which I'm surprised.
I actually got to correct myself. They actually go into keyboards a bit, but you're right. There's no computers. There's no
Or whatever the hell that guy's playing on on the front cover.
yeah, there's none of that. Like, I would have liked to have seen more of that. I would have liked to seen turntables. Hell, I would have liked to have seen them talk about some of the more weird esoteric instruments people can get their hands on. Where are the bagpipes?
Yeah. Or some other like new type of instrument that someone could play. And I that was the other thing. Like back in the 90s, I was thinking of like just weird instruments that would evolve or try to come up with. And granted, I was completely far off of what instruments there are today, but just coming up with something in which you play. Like even today,
I mean, not quite as the guitar thing on the cover. So,
well, even today they're getting into like 3D, virtual 3D
yeah,
ways of creating sound, which is just crazy. And then you think of like the electronic music revolution that happened in the early 2000s, and how that is evolved, in which these guys are just like doing crazy stuff on various equipment and just cobbling together and then re-engineering shit into something that almost these musicians are becoming techs, right? And jury rigging shit to create a sound that they want to hear.
well, they missed it by just a few years. As far as instrumentation goes, like Stomp hadn't really become a thing yet. The Blue Man Group wasn't a thing. All these really experimental acts where they're just kind of cobbling together musical instruments, that really wasn't anything that was happening at the time. But I would have liked to have seen something along those lines.
Yeah, and even some, I mean, even the musicians of today, you look at like Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine and his experimentations with in creating new ways of generating sound. And then you look at who is it? I want to say Deadmau5. Is that the guy's name?
No. I mean, what really surprises me that didn't make any kind of entrance in the book is like beatboxing was huge back in the late 80s, early 90s. Like entire groups were just based around beat. I mean, the Fat Boys. That was their whole shtick, is that they were beatboxers. And that would have been neat to have seen, I think. But really, the Cyberpunk, for some reason, Cyberpunk 2020 really just kind of ignored hip hop. Like, there's brief mentions of it, but yeah, for as deeply political as hip hop was in the late 80s, early 90s, it really just kind of got ignored by the Cyberpunk books.
And that's something that could have been picked up with Live and Direct, right? I mean, Live and Direct, mostly media, but it was a bit Rockerboy, and they could have introduced some of this, similar to like what Rockerboy, this supplement that we're talking about, which did combine Rockerboy and media. And
I mean, they make mention of hip-hop groups, but I mean, at the time this was put out, like, the hip-hop community were the true rocker boys. You had groups like, Public Enemy out there who, and KRS-One, who, like, their whole shtick was rapping about politics and trying to inform the people.
Right, and I don't know about today's youth and age, but back in the 90s, you would constantly hear about concerts just going and ending in riots.
Yep.
And just going, I mean, I used to go to concerts and I would see how, like, the amazing mass of people who would just like bum rush the stage, and just get so freaking crazy. And nowadays,
they'd get work.
It just doesn't seem as as crazy as it used to be. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but
all right, I'm assuming that there's probably still pockets of that kind of craziness going on, probably at like metal shows and whatnot, but everything else seems, I don't follow metal, so everything else seems to have kind of chilled out.
Mm-hmm. Which is strange, because I would think there would be a lot more anger in the youth today than there was 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Anyways, very interesting how this article has kind of like brought up a lot of us to talk about contemporary society versus what was going on in the 90s and 80s versus other supplements.
It's the nature of the rocker boy to like reflect on these things.
True. Very true.
And I don't know. Our society has changed so much that even when somebody does come out and they do have a message, regardless of what side that message is coming from or what it's highlighting, it's almost immediately like criticized en masse. So I think it's harder to get the message out. Like Rage Against the Machine got back together and people just like the reaction from people was like not something I would have ever expected. But what do you mean Rage Against the Machine is political? Like, what? Yeah. Anyway, I'm ranting again.
Yeah. Let's stay on topic. So anyways, so again, this article goes into the various instruments, what people are using in 2013. Granted, I think this is a little dated article. You definitely want to update it as our little diatribe has kind of gone off on. And taking a look at this and really apply what you in the society now look at and apply it to this game. The next article is basically a 2-page product review of the MIDI. It does have some game mechanics of using the MIDI to kind of enhance your performance. It's kind of complicated in my opinion. You're looking at plus intellect or intelligence divided by 4. If you're unchipped in guitar, if you are chipped in guitar, it's intelligence plus divided by 5. If you're trying to record, it gives you another bonus with your intelligence divided by blah. So, I think that
there's stuff going on here that
yeah,
they probably could have another look at.
There's definitely a little crunch into here that probably could have gotten removed. But then again, you're talking about the 80s and crunch was the thing. So, moving on to the next article, which is Filthy Rich, which was a very interesting article in that it diverted from Rockerboy and even media and entertainment, in which it basically talks about wealth and who is wealthy and how do you get wealth.
It's the 2020 version or the 2013 version of Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. I'm your host, Robin Leach.
Yep. And how you get wealth, right? So you either inherit it, you're either a head of state or some oil-rich nation, you're a entrepreneur genius or corporate honcho, or you're just a big media star and rock star or sports star. I mean, it's definitely a well worth to read through because it kind of gives you some fun stuff to read. What was it? Simple-minded in terms of human costs. Right, so it talks about sports stars and the shit they have to deal with. And it also follows up with like toys of the rich. So yachts, private islands, and then just like the fashion. One piece of fashion or one dress that's worth 12 million euros because it's made out of thousands of diamonds. Was quite interesting. So, hey, perfect scenario for a heist. Go and steal this dress that's worth 12 million euros. There's always a buyer or other corporate agent or corporate honcho who wants that, but's not willing to pay 12 million. He's willing to pay you guys, 100,000 to go and try to grab it off that person's body. So it's a fun read to see the concepts of what wealth is in 2020. And then we get into Media Today, a Rockerboy special report, which is basic.
Before we do that,
go ahead.
There's a full-page ad on page 33 that just says ultimatum when a promise isn't enough, and it's got I want to say that's Scott Ruggles artwork. I could be wrong, but I can't figure out what the ad is for. Is it for the dress? Is it for the bottle of perfume or liquor or whatever that is?
Again, that's
the always point of pause. Like, what are they playing?
That's the point of being rich in the articles.
Yeah, yeah.
It's actually an ad for Viagra.
That makes about as much sense as anything I could think of. So,
because when you look at those pompous various ads for hoity-toity shit, yeah. You had no idea what the hell it was for, and then they hit you with the name of it, and it's like, okay, what am I buying? What? But yeah, it is a good little ad that it's just you have no fucking clue when a
But yeah,
promise
on
isn't
to
enough.
media today. Rockerboy special report. Yeah, this is they start talking about it's all about the medias. I really dig that little net 54 AV in the image.
Yeah, with the crew jumping out.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they had to reprint it 4 times in 2 pages, but
So, in this article, again, it does like a split article in which it does a breakdown of a timeline for a news crew, and then it gets into Net 54 and how Net 54 evolved to become the powerhouse it is in 2013, 2020.
in fact, the format of this really kind of is like the prototype for what would later become the core books.
Yep. Kind of, not necessarily this article, but after this article, I think a few pages later with DMS. But it does kind of give you that, hey, this is how Net 54 became the powerhouse it is, and this is where it's, branching into. This is where its various divisions separate out into. And then following this article, it gets into, where is it? So 54. It's kind of subtle in the change of the article, but basically the article is labeled as extortion, bribery, kidnapping, brainwashing, and other nasty tricks. So this kind of article talks about the various ways in which media's corporations work and how they kind of took over media and the either the rocker boys or star media stars within the organization that they like kind of took over or would eliminate, right? Like if my competitor's going to sign a contract, or if that rocker star is going to sign a contract, I'm going to just kill him. Because he's not going to sign up with me, so therefore I'm going to send hit squads after him. And just gives the various ways in which the media corporations deal with their stars, right? And their assets. And it's a great read, especially for a referee, on how you can set up a career, or not a career, a scenario in which you can get the party involved, or how a character would be treated by a media corp.
Yeah, it's again, it in just a couple of pages, it really fleshes out how to operate as a corporate, or as a corporate media entity.
Yep. And then the next article is Giants at War, which talks about a little bit about the conflict between Net 54 and DMS. So DMS really wasn't mentioned in the first book, or the core book. Net 54 was. So I think DMS was kind of introduced with this supplement.
Yeah.
And to your point,
that image that they've got representing Howard Wong of DMS is badass. Like that is so ridiculously 80s corporate that it kind of screams at you.
Yep. And I think it gets to your point in which this is where it kind of lays out how the corporate books really started getting fleshed out. Because there's one full page of like the various regional offices, the stock shares available on markets, who owns what, a breakdown of all the various troops, what equipment they own, etc. And And then goes
I got
into
ahead
the
of my-
full background.
This is straight up the prototype for the corporate report. Those books and their format.
And it's a great read, because it talks about how DMS really got into the various aspects of what it means to be a media giant, whether it's music, the technology behind it, even cyberware research, when it comes to like even brain dance, and just how that media organization just expanded into the various aspects.
Of interesting to note is this was put out in '89, and they talk about their animation studio and talk about 3D modeling and scanning in real world objects. Like that was years ahead of its time. For them to even be looking that far in '89, I think our computer animation was Tron and The Last Starfighter. Like those were the big in your face representations of what computer animation looked like. So for them to include that at all was pretty far advanced.
Yep. And definitely well worth a read. If you like the corporate books, you'll definitely love that section. Then you get into Optical Scanner, which is a kind of an article. It's hard to describe, but it's I enjoyed it. It's basically a dialogue or kind of a story, from a viewpoint of one person, and how Arasaka is doing various experiments in the combat zone, and how that particular person was able to escape, and he like explains exactly what Arasaka is trying to do, which is the first mention of Arasaka or any non-media within this, or Media Corp within this book.
And again, looking forward, they the whole thing kind of alludes to like reality television without calling it reality television.
Yep.
They're talking about a lot of the media people consume is just amateur footage of real people.
Yep. And it talks about the subliminal imagery system.
Yeah.
Kind of gives you a little bit of some stats on that, but also at the end of this article, Rockerboy is putting out a bounty of 3,000 EB to confirm this story. So, as a referee, you could definitely base a campaign or at least a mini-series on that article.
Yeah.
Again, well worth the read. The next section is about brain dance. And to me, this is a lot more thorough than Live and Direct. And granted, I think Live and Direct probably made the assumption, okay, you've already read this, so we're just going to add in a little bit about brain dance. But this actually gets into various equipments and what you can buy.
I think Live and Direct could have done itself a service by just reprinting this whole section.
Or enhancing it, right?
Yeah.
And just taking each item and creating its own little table or some other section in which it's more condensed in a way. But yeah, it gets into brain dance and talks a little bit about like certain aspects of brain dance that you don't always think about, right? Because one part of it, when I was reading through it recently, was how when they do a brain dance, even though the person who's doing the brain dance might be in pure agony, because they got a gunshot or they broke their arm, as a brain dance editor, you're going to go in there and you're going to adjust it so either it's not as painful or it's going to give you a little pleasure.
Yeah, you gotta you can edit the sensory feedback to have it be whatever you need it to be. So like you said, for like gunshots or anything painful, you turn those receptors down, and then for like if you're doing like some erotic shit, you turn that shit way up.
Yeah, and that was the other thing. It was like, oh yeah, this gunshot could feel like, or sorry, if someone was beating on you with like a baseball bat on your back, the editor could make it feel like it was a massage, or it could be heavenly orgasm.
I would imagine individual units, like the user could adjust that themselves too. Like that would seem to make sense to me. They don't talk about it. But,
yeah, and that kind of got me into a weird thinking of like some brain dance editor who kind of like starts weaning people on to the pleasures of pain, like almost like a Hellraiser type of thing, in which eventually the person would appreciate the torture that they were going through, like some cyber psycho who's a serial killer who just like slowly weans his victims on to wanting to be tortured.
I always find that brain dance in the books is described in one of two ways. It's described as either being like a static recording that you just kind of live through and experience, or there's this other type of brain dance that is interactive, like a video game, VR video game. In my head, I can see how you could have one or the other, but I think a lot of people like try to mix those ideas, and I don't think mixing them is compatible. Like I think you could have VR brain dances as their own separate thing, and then you could have these experience brain dances where you're just locked into what's going on, which is much closer to what we see in 2077 or in the movie Strange Days with playback.
Yeah. Yeah, and that whole in Strange Days, the whole thing of like you're feeling the killer, and that again the whole craziness that can instill into a person.
I've always wanted to know if Strange Days, if their idea of playback came directly from brain dance, because I don't ever remember seeing anything like brain dance before Cyberpunk. So there's a lot of fiction out there that I haven't read, so it's possible I've missed it.
I think we talked about this a couple episodes ago, which was it Brainstorm?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Well, granted, it didn't get into the craziness that Strange Days came into. But yeah, moving along, we got about 15 minutes left, and
they really get into how brain dance works in this article.
Yes,
and make it, how to edit it, how to use it, the different types of decks you need.
Yeah, that's the one thing I liked is the pieces of equipment you actually need for it.
Yeah, and then afterwards they get into a little adventure all around brain dance, which kind of plays out a lot like when you get introduced to brain dance in the video game. Kind of a nice touch.
Yep. Yeah, and that's it's a 2-page adventure, 3 pages with the NPCs or PCs. I couldn't really tell. If they're NPCs, they're very well fleshed out.
4 pages.
Actually, 4 pages with them. 5 pages with the net map too. Yeah, so if you get Rockerboy, you'll actually see how the old school 2013 net running worked. It's a lot more like Red than 2020.
Yeah, that's true. It's interesting to see the evolution.
Yep. And then the following article is about a braindance star who is a solo. It's a one-page little write-up with his stats.
The picture looks like they found some off-duty cop or something like that, and just like, hey, put on a pair of sunglasses, let us take your picture.
Yeah, and that's if we ever interview with Mike, there's a lot of questions, but I think one of our questions would be, hey Mike, would you be interested in doing more things and doing, like, talks about the various books, and like what were you thinking with the art here or this particular article, and who are these people anyways? Because I'm assuming, back in the day they knew everybody who they were taking pictures of.
Oh yeah, well, hell, like I said, the cover model for Solo Fortune 2 was Ross Wynn, so yeah, I'm assuming that these were all like friends and like people in their gaming group and just people they knew.
Yep. God, those sunglasses are so 80s.
So very 80s.
Moving along. Then we get into another article about various releases. So they're like album releases and short little reviews of each of the albums, giving like a certain amount of stars. What's the most popular one? Dominion over Destiny or El Tempesto Grande?
Live link up, it got the same number of stars, didn't it? Yeah.
Fight for Your Freedom was the lowest by Dusty Fields and Mara Records. So that's fun.
I'll say the picture of the punk rock chick on page 75, man, I was in love with her when I first read this book. I was like, that chick is. But her butt looks weird.
Yeah, well, it was quick art. That looks like it might have been a Huckabee or Huckabout.
Huckabout?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're probably right.
So again, this article is a little bit of a fluff, and then we get into In Concert, which is the Triumph of Ice, Blood and Ice in Concert, which is a band. This was
again,
actually
talk about art here.
And this article, which basically talks about the band Blood and Ice, was pretty good. Kind of give you a little bit of background of, again, the world in general. It was a good read.
It's a lot of fluff. There's nothing until you get to the last two. There's really nothing more than fluff here. It's good fluff. Like if you're interested in playing a Rockerboy, give it a read. If you're interested in running a concert, there you go.
Yep. And after that, it's basically a couple ads, and then the final, similar to Solo Fortune.
The ad doesn't make sense because it's live from Cheyenne Mountain. Cheyenne Mountain doesn't. That's where they dropped the rock.
No, they didn't drop on Cheyenne Mountain. They dropped it on Colorado Springs. Is that the same?
Well, they dropped it on NORAD, which is Cheyenne Mountain.
Maybe it wasn't fully written out yet. Retcon.
Retcon. Or it could just be the name of fucking album, and it could be from anywhere. Like that could be them being cheeky. Like, well, it doesn't exist anymore, so we're gonna do it live from there.
Yep. And then the last page is basically some ads that people put out, similar to the old guitar magazines in which people put out ads for various things.
Classified section.
Dr. Zooks.
Hello, Fort had this as well. It's good stuff.
So, Dr. Zeus asks, how do you recommend I run Rockerboy campaign on an overall basis and on a session-to-session basis, or maybe scenario for a Rockerboy campaign? So there is a supplement called Eurotour that kind of gets into how you could run a Rockerboy campaign, because it's basically about Curie Eurodyne's European tour. I've kind of stayed away from Rockerboys in my campaigns because I just never really liked the class. But I know Wisdom, you did an interesting campaign with a Rockerboy campaign, right?
Yes, I did. I mean, there are ways I can answer this. The first is there's really two ways to do it. You can have the characters be the band itself. I don't know how many people are in your game or what all that consists of or what their interests are. But if you're running a Rockerboy campaign, it has to obviously center around the Rockerboy. So you can have the people be in the band, or you can have them, as in the case of Eurotour, be like support, be like security and road crew and technical and those things. The fixer who gets everybody their drugs. Like those are really the two ways, and you can of course mix that to whatever your personal group's tastes are. As far as running the campaign, I mean, the reason I got burned out on it is because it was just going from one concert to the next, and anytime I tried to introduce anything else, it just kind of fell by the wayside. Granted, I was running with a kind of a goofy group at the time, and one of the players was kind of problematic, so it made it hard to get everybody else to focus on anything either. But you can introduce a lot of elements into a Rockerboy campaign, such as, shisty dudes coming in and trying to underhand your tour manager or your agent. Band members getting kidnapped for ransom, or just because people don't like the message you're putting out. One of the more fun things I did with the game is I had them pick a band, and that band was just the sound of their band. Like my players picked a punk rock cover band called Me First and the Gimme Gimmies, and I had to listen to that every time they threw a concert. So it can backfire on you. Not that I don't like Me First and the Gimme Gimmies, I do. But at the time, they only had like 2 albums, so it was very repetitive.
Right. I read, I don't know if it was a story on your site, but basically it was the manager was kind of selling drugs from place to place. Yeah. And the party was clueless on that, and all of a sudden it turned to shit.
They were given plenty of clues about, and then, when they ignored those clues, things just kind of came up and bit them in the ass. Which worked out really well for a Rockerboy campaign, because that's kind of how it works. Like, the guys in the band may not know the shady shit that Rhodey over there is doing. He could be smuggling all sorts of stuff in those guitar cases. Or, the agent might be selling their music to like advertising corporations without, their say so.
Right.
All sorts of good stuff can happen in a Rockerboy campaign. Just don't expect a lot of actual action, because that's not really what a Rockerboy campaign tends to be about.
Yep.
Although they did get shakedown quite a bit, so there was that.
Yeah, and you can also play the frontman PC and NPC band, talent agent PC. Yeah, so the other thing you can look into is how corporations, depending upon how well the frontman and the band is going, is, corporations might start taking an interest in them and start fighting off of them, and play out that dialogue of how do they juggle, these talent agents coming along and trying to hire them out, and how you can play off, or whether or not the party can play off each of those elements against each other, right? Because what's going to happen is if they say no to one corporation, well, that corporation, like I said, in Rockerboy, they talk about, if I can't have you, no one will, which means they'll either flat out kill the band or do some other nefarious thing to kind of destroy the band, whether it's introducing or trying to get the band hooked on various drugs, or do something that will basically destroy their reputation, etc. So how those corporations play off each other, and then it would be up to the players, it's specifically your talent agent PC, to juggle that, and how. And you would have to try to give them hints in which they could play off of that. I'm trying to think of, like, I know there's been various movies and television series in which you have a storyline in which the person plays off various elements or various parties against each other, right? To the benefit of the main character.
There's some really great Rockerboy stories out there that you can use liberally as inspiration for your campaign. Eddie and the Cruisers, Light of Day with Joan Jett, Streets of Fire with Ellen Aim. I mean, you have to search for some of them. You can even use like autobiographical movies, like The Doors, or anything like that. There is plenty of intrigue in the music industry. It's a very cutthroat business. Artists are taken advantage of. They are, by their very nature, they are often narcissistic and prone to self-destructive behavior, as well as, just being prima donnas. Not all of them, of course, but there's enough of that going on that it'll make for an interesting campaign.
Yeah, and even the infighting,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because that's another thing that you can play off of the characters. And I know this day and age, you don't want to have antagonistic players, but as long as the players are willing to accept that role,
I mean, there's antagonist. You don't want to be a dick above the board. Your character can be a dick, but as long as you know where the boundaries are, you're mostly going to be okay. Just make sure that everybody's on board with this plan, and that'll solve a lot of those issues. Communication is key in all things. But yeah, like he said, inter-party conflict. That's part and parcel for the Rockerboy lifestyle.
Yep. So we're about time. So I think we can wrap it up. I don't see any other questions, but thank you for asking those, Doctor.
Mr. Gazooks.
Yeah, we'll definitely answer any questions that are proposed to us and interrupt our own selves. So next time we are going to do a year in review of Cyberpunk, and we're going to talk about what's happened this year around Cyberpunk, whether it's various movies, television shows, the game that came out, all the DLCs that Artel has presented, etc., etc. And that's going to kind of end out the year for us. And after that, we are going to take a couple not weeks, but necessarily episodes off for end of year, so we can regather our strength and get focused on for the new year. Which the new year, we're going to continue doing some more reviews of the various books. I think we have like quite a few left to go through.
Oh, there's so many left.
Also,
we will get more lined up.
Yep, more interviews. We are going to try to get Mr. Pondsmith to join us. Again, that's not a promise. It is only a rumor. But we are going to do our best to yes, to have some grognards talk to the old OG of grognards when it comes to Cyberpunk. So, but we're also going to talk to some other people and get them involved. Again, any topics you guys want us to talk about, by all means, ping us through the various methods we have available, as well as going to Cyber Nation Uncensored's Discord and posting under the Forlorn Dopes channel, and ask us any questions, and we will come up with more scenarios. So, anything else you got?
Just gonna say, you can always hit me up on Facebook in either the Cyberpunk 2020 group or the Datafortress2020 group. We don't have any specific channels or anything there, but yeah, I pretty much pay attention to whatever happens. Yeah, I can't wait till next episode when it's just an all rant all the time episode. I'm looking forward to that. And then yeah, we're going to take a break.
All right. So you can check me out on my site, cybersmily.net. That's Cybersmily without the ending E, so LY. .net. I have a bunch of utilities for Cyberpunk 2020, Cyberpunk Red that you can use, hopefully with your games. You can also, I also have a Discord. There's a link on my site to it that you can go to. I also hang out amongst the various Cyberpunk Discords. So if you do an @Cybersmiley, good chance you're going to be hitting me if you try to target me. Also, I navigate the various Reddits, whether it's Cyberpunk Red or Cyberpunk 2020. Really should start paying attention to the one that Mike hangs out on as well, which is more geared towards Cyberpunk Cyberpunk 2077. But yeah, you can check me out on those various locations.
I am Wisdom. You can find my works at Datafortress2020, the largest, most comprehensive Cyberpunk 2020 site that you're likely to find. I'm also at the aforementioned Facebook groups. any Discord stuff, you can just direct towards Cybersmily or Cybernation Uncensored. I will most likely see it there. I'm on Reddit, usually just sniping comments here and there where I think I can help. And yeah, thank you all very much for tuning in and joining us this evening. We look forward to seeing you again.
Hi, you Tahimi. We're actually ending. But anyways, just in time.
Thank you, Cybernation Uncensored, though, for hosting us and providing us all support.
Thank you, Rob and Cybernation Uncensored, for hosting us for the past, I think we're almost to 2 years.
Udahime is such an interesting name.
Well, at first I thought it was Utah I Me.
Yeah, you can be right. I don't know. We could ask her.
It's not. I know.
Udahime. But yeah, thank you very much, everyone. And that is it. We are signing off now.
Yep. Have a great one. Talk to you guys later.
Cybernation Uncensored.